It's been a whole year in Canada. Exactly a year ago to the day, my husband and our 2 cats and what was then a pregnancy bump landed in Calgary, Canada. It feels like this year has gone by so quickly, and today I'm going to be reflecting on our first year in Canada and basically just share how I feel about living here and how this year has gone for us. Okay, let's start with an overarching thing and then I'm gonna get into like the details of different aspects of our life. I've emigrated before. So I moved to Dubai when I was 13 with my family, and then I moved back to South Africa, which I feel like also was an adjustment because it was many years afterwards. And then we moved here. Of the 3 times that I've moved, this one felt like the easiest adjustment. Maybe that had to do with that I'm older, maybe I'm just like more secure in who I am, what I like doing, or maybe it's that it's the 3rd time that I've done it, so I learned from the other 2 times. Or maybe it's that there is more technology now than the other 2 times that I did it, so I've been able to really keep in contact with loved ones through video calls. Back when I moved to Dubai when I was 13, my way of keeping in touch was a computer in the hotel lobby. Anyway, adapting to Canada has been easier than I expected it to be. That doesn't mean it's without challenges or without things that are not our favorite thing, and I'm going to get into that detail now, but in general, I can say I expected it to be a lot harder than it's been. Leading up to the anniversary of having moved to Canada, I definitely felt a very strong longing to be in person with my family and friends. I have this longing for them to just come over for tea, you know, the kind of friends and family that you've known your whole life, and it's just so comfortable with them and it's so easy, and I miss having neighbors that I know that live 2 minutes away from me, and I have this longing to share Elba in person with my family and friends. So I've really had that come up as we were coming on to being here a year. I think that usually that feeling does come up sooner than a year, but I think because we were so busy having a baby that shifted out a little bit because life was really busy. So there were times that I really missed my family and friends, but I think that general like, wow, it's been really long now, and I really have that longing sort of started coming about as we were encroaching on a year. So one of the difficulties of having emigrated to Canada in Calgary is that it's far. Like, it's really far for people to travel to come visit us from South Africa, and it's really far for us if we want to go back to South Africa. I'm also not really 100% sure, being in Calgary, like what is going to bring family and friends here other than us. Like, this is not a major touristy place. There's not like major draws to people. Like, it's not on the top 20 you know, places that you should visit kind of thing. I assume, I haven't checked those lists. And sure, it does have Banff and the mountains and the lakes, and those are really beautiful, but I'm not really sure other than us, like what's going to bring people to Calgary to visit us. But I do think that if we, for example, moved to Europe and we were closer to South Africa and we were in the same time zone as South Africa, and there were sort of other things that were bringing them, like maybe they have loads of other friends in Europe, then maybe more people would be visiting us. Because I do think that South Africans typically do travel to Europe more often than they would to a really far country like Canada. And it's also really far for us to travel back to South Africa, especially with Elba still being under 1. Like, that would be a minimum of 2 flights, and it will probably be around 24 hours or more of travel time, and then it will be a -8-hour time difference, which is a really big adjustment for anybody, and I'm guessing for an under 1-year-old quite. So it's also not that easy for us to just pop back to South Africa. We did go back and forth a lot about whether we wanted to go back to South Africa now in December. For very many reasons, it would be appealing to go back, see family and friends, let them meet Elba, have Elba be able to swim in the sea and touch some sand and all of those lovely things. And a major thing would be to break up the very long winter. But with our back and forth, we decided that we're not going to go. And that, I think, probably also contributed to me really starting to miss family, because I had this vision that I would be seeing them soonish, and now I'm like, oh, I don't know when I'm going to be seeing them. So the main reason that we're just not going to be traveling back is because Elba is still very small to travel with really far, and speak about finances more later on in this video, but incurring the expense of going back to South Africa right now, I think we would rather put that money into becoming more financially stable after our move. Anyway, if South Africa was closer in terms of travel time and also the same time zone, I think we definitely would have gone back in December. On the bright side though of me having this longing, just when it started to get really like, my mom messaged to say she's coming to visit for my birthday. So that will be in a week and a bit. So that definitely helps with what I'm feeling right now in terms of really just wanting to have Elba spend some time with family and have family here with us and just be in the presence of family really. Okay, now let's move on to other topics now that I've spoken about, I guess, the obvious one, which is like when you move away from family and friends, you inevitably start really missing your family and friends. Okay, so in this year, we rent a house. I know that based off of this, it might look like we just moved in, but that is not accurate. We had a bed base. I sold the bed base because I wanted a floor bed. I had a bedside cabinet. I sold my bedside cabinet and the lamps and everything. We had a fully furnished room that looked like a normal room. I just got rid of all that stuff because of practical parenting and things that I prefer in terms of raising Elba. Anyway, it's been an interesting one because you realize, of course, that it's going to be expensive refurnishing an entire place that you're going to live in. But one of the interesting things has been the expenses you don't think that you need to incur. And one of them, and this is probably top of mind because I made one of these purchases literally yesterday, but one of them is like things that I just didn't think that we would be purchasing in the first year. So the first one was when the weather changed from winter to summer, there came the wildfires and the air quality became horrendous. So of course we bought an air purifier. And then it became hot. So of course we bought a fan. And now recently, as we're in fall going towards winter, it became crazy dry and we just bought a humidifier. So there's loads of little things like on top of things like winter gear, thankfully, because we moved here in October of last year. So we had to get winter gear like basically as soon as we landed. We don't have to do winter gear again this year. We just did for Elba, but Ian and I have all of our winter gear. So yeah, a thing to constantly be buying things that you either had in South Africa or you realize that you need living in a country with a different climate and different factors that affect you. So you want those things. What is nice and easy though is, of course, here is Amazon. So you can have everything delivered like the next day. In this video, I'm gonna bounce between things that are easier or nice versus things that are not so easy or maybe not so nice. One of the things that I think is important to discuss that I'm incredibly grateful for living here is that we don't deal with load shedding. To be honest, like I'm very, very, very grateful for that. Like that's not something that I've taken for granted, even though we've been here for a year. When we left South Africa, it was already many times a day for several hours a day. It was very disruptive to our lives. It was very stressful trying to plan everything. And I am very grateful that for a year long, we have had power consistently. When we speak to people in South Africa and suddenly there's load shedding or to move meetings and discussions, like I'm super grateful to not be dealing with that major disruption to our lives anymore. Okay, but having said that, now on the other side, my experience, please don't hate me for saying this, I don't think that Calgary is pretty. Like I get it, living in Dubai, Dubai was also not very pretty, like it's very sandy. Yes, the buildings are magnificent and there are some like majorly beautiful things in Dubai, but in general, I mean like your streets and stuff were like some palm trees and like a lot of sand. I think and the reason I'm like Calgary's not that pretty is because where I'm from in South Africa, or South Africa in general, it's just like next level beautiful. Like you don't have to look for beauty. It's just like right there, everywhere, beautiful big trees, and it's beautiful throughout the seasons. Like all of the seasons have loads of beautiful nature, the oceans, the mountains, like just stunning, like so stunning. And then Calgary, on the other hand, like it has beautiful neighborhoods, especially the older ones, but the neighborhood we live in is like prairies. Like it's just grass and like some hills and little, not very well established trees. And it's not like such a new neighborhood, but it's new enough that there isn't like a lot of nature to look at. Now, I think that the snow is beautiful. Like for me, I find it incredibly stunning when it's like everything is white and so peaceful. Like it's really, really beautiful for me. But when the snow melts, then it's like dead grass everywhere. It's just like hills and like dirt and and yeah, dead grass. So at that point, it's really like not very pretty in my mind. But then of course, summer came and everything turned green, and it definitely was prettier. And of course, yes, Banff is right there. Yes, it's incredibly beautiful. Yes, Alberta has some of the most beautiful hiking spots, and the river that runs through the city is crazy beautiful, and the parks are crazy beautiful. But what I'm speaking about is like everyday life, like the neighborhoods where we live. Obviously, I said there are some beautiful neighborhoods. It's just not as pretty as what I experienced in South Africa, where like nature was just all around me. I didn't have to drive to the mountain. Like the mountain was right there. And I guess I just kind of missed that. And maybe South Africa made me a bit of a snob in terms of like what is pretty to me. Right, let's move on from that. So while I don't think that Calgary is the prettiest city, I am incredibly grateful that I can take walks by myself at night and feel okay. That again is something that I definitely don't take for granted being here. No matter what the weather is, it's really nice for me to walk outside and just feel okay, even if it's just me and Elba walking outside, even if we're walking in the dark around the block. So this is something I really don't take for granted, and it's not that I can walk, it's that I feel okay to walk with Elba by myself. So this was something that really got to me in South Africa. And it's not necessarily about the crime, but it's how I related to it. One or two incidences that I had really evoked fear within me in South Africa, and I became quite fearful and would live in a state of, let's call it awareness, but also anxiety and fear a lot of the time. Even if I was in an area that is so-called safe, I would still feel uncomfortable or vulnerable. So I'm grateful to be able to take a walk and feel comfortable, just me and Elba. I'm grateful to not be so conscious and so constantly aware of like, did I lock the car? Where's my things? Do I have this? And just all of that stuff that I was doing in South Africa. I don't think that it affects everybody the same, but for me, it had become really stressful. And there are loads of things here that are not perfect, or I much rather prefer South Africa, but the waiting of feeling safer and not feeling so vulnerable and so anxious all the time about my physical safety or the safety of my things is something I'm just really, really grateful for living here. Anyway, I do wish that in South Africa I didn't experience so much fear and anxiety around the safety aspect, but it was just one of those things that had really started to affect me quite a lot. Anyway, moving on to another aspect of our lives. Okay, I don't have a Canadian job and I don't work like a typical employee works, so I can't speak personally, but I will speak a little bit about Ian's experience, and that is, so when I first landed here, we came by the route where you don't have a job and you only start seeking a job once you're here because your permanent residency is activated upon landing. So in the beginning, he was doing a lot of applications, and it was a bit tough because most of the companies want some Canadian experience. So the first job is really quite hard to secure, I think, versus other jobs. Not that he's had more than one job, but it's just because you don't have that Canadian experience. You really need to get your foot in the door. It didn't take him that long to get a job. I covered this in another video, so thankfully he did secure a job here in Calgary. But it was quite a hectic one, and now having spoken to other friends who emigrated, I think that more people can relate to this than we initially assume, because you think the hard work is getting a job. But then it's also adapting to a job. And for Ian, it was a big adaptation because firstly, he is an actuary and he got an actuarial job, but it was in an industry or an avenue that he wanted to go into, but he doesn't have that much experience with it practically. He only had the theoretical knowledge for it. So firstly, it's going into a new type of job. And then secondly, you've just moved to a new country. And then third, it was his first corporate job because previously he had just worked for small businesses. And then finally having to do all of that while adapting to parenthood because Elba was born like a month and a bit after he started this job. So I think he's had a really like hectic challenges in terms of adapting to the job. So it did take like many months to start feeling more secure and more comfortable and loads of long hours and all of that stuff. But I think we're finally at the stage where he's feeling comfortable in the role, comfortable in the company, and it's more of a sort of stable setting in that regard. The other adjustment to the working environment is that the company that he works for is very multicultural. So it's not just getting used to one culture, it's many different cultures. It's loads of expats. So that's sort of different humor, different ways of speaking about things, different approaches to things. So that's quite a lot to adapt to, especially if you've been in South Africa, which is a multicultural country in the sense of South Africans have loads of different backgrounds, but you know South African backgrounds. Whereas here, it's like people from many different countries that you're not all that familiar with. And then the other thing is that now with this kind of like half remote working, half in-person working, his colleagues are all over Canada. So the social aspect at work has also changed quite a bit. So he works from home most of the time, and then 2 days of the week he'll go into the office. But then even when he goes into the office, in the office is only the people who happen to live in Calgary. Everybody else who lives in different parts of Canada will go to their offices. Anyway, so a lot of his time and his energy has gone into adapting in the workplace and to his job. Right, then our cats, they've adapted surprisingly well. I'm just gonna speed this up because she's tired. They had probably like 1 or 2 days of adapting, but they seem to really be thriving here. They went from indoor cats to now being cats that hang out in our backyard, and they seem to really, really love that. This is a bigger space than we lived in South Africa because we knew we were moving, so we never moved to a bigger space. So I think they also like that. And I actually feel a little bit nervous or sad that we'll be going into the colder months again and they won't be spending as much time outside, but they also last winter seemed to really like it, like lying on the cat tree in the winter sun. That's like in Calgary, the sun shines like a lot of the time. So that's really nice for them. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, the cats seem great. They seem to be doing really well. Okay, then on to making friends in a new country. Of course, this is like a big topic because making friends as an adult in your 30s is not always the easiest thing. And then you move to a new country. So yeah, making friends. I didn't worry about this at all. Like I wasn't nervous about making friends. I think the reason is I am not somebody who needs a lot of friends. I'm not somebody who really thrives off doing a lot of social things. I like a handful of close relationships, and I'm very fine with that happening in its own time. Like I'm very okay to go however long it takes to build a sense of community. Obviously, I do miss the community I had in South Africa. I miss the friends I had. I miss the relationships that I cultivated. But, you know, I still am able to keep in touch online. It's just not having that in person. But yeah, so I have made friends living here. It's like one of the #1 questions I get asked, especially because I don't work a normal job. So I don't have like colleagues, or I'm not really seeing in-person people at all. I do get asked like how I've met people or how I've made relationships, and basically I just go to things that I want to go to, and I'm just me, and I kind of see who resonates with that, like who's it fun to hang out with. I do find that like making friends is a lot like dating. So there is that whole time period where you hang out with people and it's kind of like you're sussing out whether you want to continue the relationship or not, and you're getting a feel for each other while, you know, doing whatever activity you're doing. So that part I don't really like. I don't really like friendship dating, but I don't find it difficult, like once you've kind of found people where you resonate with them, to just make plans and hang out with them. So yeah, of course, this is not like long relationships and deep bonds that go back way, because, you know, we haven't lived here very long. But I think I've met some really cool people that I feel very well connected to, and it's really nice for me to spend time with them. Like I said, I'm not somebody who requires a lot of social activities. So for me, if I'm doing something social once a week, that's really nice. Twice a week, okay, cool. 3 times is probably a bit much for me. So the whole making friends aspect might be very different for somebody in a different phase of their life, and also who really thrives off of hanging around with people or doing things with people a lot of the time. Of course, with Elba, I have veered towards making mom friends, and the reason for that is just that it's easier if it's a mom friend, because then you do activities that they know are like easier to do with a baby, and you can kind of bond over the whole like we have a baby thing. So most of the friends that I've made here are moms who have children of a similar age or maybe a little bit older. For Ian, this has been different because, again, I don't work a normal job, so I'm able to go do things in the middle of the day in the week where he goes to the office or he's working, and his colleagues are not necessarily, like I said, in Calgary. So for Ian, especially with the amount of time that he's put into his job, there hasn't been that much social time, but now that we're going into the colder months, Ian will probably be more social than he was last year because he likes to go snowboarding. So you typically go snowboarding with other people. Anyway, so in terms of making friends, yeah, we've made friends, met some really cool people. I find that Canadians are very friendly. I mean, who doesn't know that? But of course, there's a difference between friendly and establishing a friendship. And I find that people in South Africans are friendly as in like establish a friendship really quickly, or at least that's my experience. Like, I feel like South Africans will like meet you in a grocery store and invite you to their house for a braai later that day. Where Canadians, I think, are not exactly that kind of friendly, very nice. But then there are the more exceptions where I've really had people who invite me places or realize that I'm new to Calgary and go out of their way to say, hey, you're new here. Do you want to hang out? Or do you want to do this thing that you've never done or never experienced? Or like, hey, let's go there together so you get to experience that thing. So I've just found that people are really, really considerate about the fact that I'm new here. And it was like a thing when people found out that I moved here during pregnancy to realize that, oh, of course, she's raising a baby in a way that's more alone than what you would typically have. I don't have family here. I don't, have a lot of friends and all of that. And then I think people have that mindset and they're like, oh, let's invite you places and do things. So that's been really, really nice. Okay, moving on. The healthcare system. It's different from South Africa. Here, the state provides a healthcare system whether you like it or not. In South Africa, you can go private or state. I think there are pros and cons to this. I'm not someone who likes to frequently go to the doctor, so this is not a topic I necessarily want to talk about much, and I don't think that I'm going to have the same experience or anything really valuable to share for other people. What I will say is we used a midwife for the birth of Elba, and we had a home birth, which was great. It was a little bit difficult because there is a midwife shortage, so I couldn't pick a midwife, and I was actually just grateful to get a midwife. But that would have been true in South Africa as well. Like in Somerset West, where I was, I think there's only one midwife there anyway. So it's not like South Africa has an abundance of midwives either. It's just in South Africa, you would be able to pick your midwife because you are paying for it or your insurance is paying for it. Whereas here, the government or your taxes are paying for it. Anyway, so yeah, that's all really I can say about the healthcare system. The appointment kind of things are funded by the state, and then you or your insurance must cover like your medications or additional things. Right, of course, we need to talk about the weather. Aside from friends, I guess the weather is a major thing I also get asked about. Yes, Calgary, Canada has extreme weather, but I really don't think it's such a big deal. Maybe it's because I lived in Dubai, which is also extreme weather. It's just extreme to the other end, but I really don't find the weather to be such a major thing. I find the snow is peaceful. I find it's beautiful. Yes, it takes adjusting. Yes, you make mistakes. Yes, you have to have the gear and the things, and you have to consider like leaving your house a lot sooner because you gotta plug in your car and plug out your car and heat up your car before you get in it, and you have to put on all your layers, and if you forget something in the car, it's gonna freeze, and there's all of that kind of adjusting, but I really didn't find it to be that unpleasant. What I miss in terms of like weather vibes, and it's not a weather thing, this is just living inland, is this is the first time I've lived inland. Dubai is by the ocean. South Africa, I lived by the ocean. So what's been really hard for me actually is I very much miss the ocean. I miss the sea. So the weather is not the thing for me. It's the sea. I miss the sea. I do have a really big longing to just like put my toes in sand and feel salt water and all of that. But yeah, what I will say has been an adjustment though, is that Calgary is very dry. So I've not lived in such a dry climate before in my life, so that has been an adjustment. But the very cold, like Calgary is equipped for the very cold, and the snow, it's like, it was almost like fun adapting to that because it was different, and I don't really mind that. Also, it probably makes it easier that the sun shines in Calgary like all the time. So you don't get that sort of really gloomy, depressing winter for many months. It's like pretty because the sun is shining and it's white everywhere, so I think it's okay. Now let's talk financial stuff. One of the things here that is hard for me compared to South Africa is I really miss the price of good quality food in South Africa. So we choose to eat organic and free range, preferably local, from like a local farmer, all that. So that means that our food often has a higher price tag than conventionally purchased food. And it did in South Africa as well. But in South Africa, I feel that the higher price tag was not that much higher. And it wasn't that expensive. Like I feel like it was much easier to get nice, free range, good quality, no hormones kind of meat. Whereas here, the red meat is quite a bit pricier. So yeah, in South Africa, we were also like, I'd say friends with the farmers that we bought our stuff from, where here you're re-establishing those relationships. And so far it's been lovely. We found small businesses. We go to the markets to source our food. I think it's just that it's a lot more expensive than South Africa, and I'm taking that sort of relatively, like buying that stuff here versus buying that stuff in South Africa. In South Africa, it was just more affordable in my opinion. And then rent. Rent is a huge expense. It really is. Like rent here is very high. Ours also even went up because our landlord had an increase of a bunch of stuff and it was becoming not feasible for him to keep this house, and we really didn't want to move. So it was an honest discussion around like making it work for all parties. So we did have an increase in rent even though we've not lived here a whole year. I am very grateful that we opted to have our utilities included, so we don't have a major fluctuation between seasons of the utilities becoming more expensive. Yeah, so we've not considered buying yet. Loads of people ask me that as well, like whether we're house shopping, we're gonna buy a house. We're not there yet. Like we really wanna just live here a little bit longer and rent and just get a feel for the places. And I don't know if we will wanna buy or any of that. So to answer that question, which is a frequently asked question, no, we wanna rent for right now, and that is what's working for us right now. Okay, and then we are not the best indication of like how you'll be financially if you move to another country, because we are not a typical dual income household. When we moved to Canada, I did work remotely and I kept my business in South Africa. I still have my business in South Africa, but I scaled down drastically to be able to be home and spend all the time with Elvis. So I still work, but I don't work the same amount as somebody who is working full time. And also all the money I make does go to my South African business, which I do buy things here through my South African business or using South African money, but we're not your typical dual income household to give you an indication of exactly like how it is adjusting financially here. But that being said, we saved to move here and we are still rebuilding that savings. We're not majorly stressed about building it back up because we saved that money to move here. It's that we are at a place now where we can save monthly, even though we're not a typical dual income household, and we feel, I guess, fine financially. We just want to rebuild up your kind of safety net savings, which we had to incur a lot of expenses moving here. And different people will make different financial decisions. We've decided to really balance it and not be like super restrictive in terms of our spending, but still be mindful to not like deplete all of our money and not have any kind of safety. And the reason for that is that it is a challenge to move to a new place. And it's even more a challenge. There are things in your life that you find enriching, but then you're not spending your money to buy those things or get those things. So one example is, we speak about it often, we could have opted to live in a much smaller place, maybe a basement apartment kind of thing. Do you call them basement apartments? Anyway, a basement, and then we would have been able to save a lot more money and we would have been able to replenish our savings, maybe even like, you know, more than that. But we are homebound people. We spend a lot of time in our home, and also with winter you spend a lot of time inside as well. So we opted maybe for a bigger house, so a bigger rent expense. I don't regret that personally, because I think it makes a major difference to your well-being. Now that's to say we're still mindful, like we didn't go even bigger. And yes, we opted to live quite a bit outside of downtown where the rent is slightly cheaper, things like that. But I think that it's a balance between spending to really enrich your life, but also then kind of making sure that you are making financially wise decisions, to put it that way. Anyway, each family is going to make their own financial decisions. Like I said, we opt for food that has a higher price tag, but then we haven't traveled since we've been here. We haven't really done what I would deem like luxury things, but we have spent money on things that I think enrich our life or that we sort of really enjoy having in our lives. And the goal now is not to have a huge savings, but just to have savings to be more stable in unpredictable times. Oh, also we should probably mention we did have a baby. So we had to buy a lot of baby things that other people might not be spending their money on. Okay, moving away from the financial stuff to the government, or our interactions with, I guess, the government. I'm not going to go into detail about that. I'm not going to discuss politics in this video, but what I will say has been really nice is the efficiency with some of the things that we've dealt with. It has been really easy to get Elba's birth certificate, to get Elba's passport, and doing our taxes and receiving checks in the mail from the government has been a good experience in terms of just like efficiency and reliability. Okay, now to discuss the final point. Before we moved to Calgary, somebody told me that they had a friend who visited Calgary and they were like, oh my gosh, Calgary is so boring. And I also watched a bunch of videos that would compare different places to live in Canada, and often it would feature that Calgary is boring. I didn't really understand when I watched those videos, like, how can a place be boring? But I get it. I do. Calgary is boring. But for me, with my lifestyle, I like it. Like, it works for me. And I get how that might not work for other people, but I don't mind that Calgary is boring. And it's hard to like explain what it is, but the thing is, Calgary is not going to entertain you. Like the city is not going to be your source of entertainment. Yes, it has like some events and it has some stuff, but it's not like a majorly entertaining city. Calgary, in my opinion, is what you make of Calgary, and it's what you do in Calgary. I really like that it is quite a peaceful way of living. It's quite a slow-paced living. That really suits me. I'm not somebody who goes to concerts really, or big on the nightlife. I don't go to like fancy restaurants and none of that stuff. So I don't need to live in a city that has like loads of events and that lifestyle. Calgary does have, you know, events, and it does have like hockey games and the Stampede and all the things. I just think it has maybe less than other cities. I think Calgary's boringness works very well for us. Anyway, so to conclude how we're doing in terms of having moved to Calgary, I think there's loads of wonderful things here. And I think there are things that are more challenging than other stuff. There's loads of stuff we miss about South Africa that's like an adaptation. But I think that in all, it's really not that difficult to adjust to Calgary. Especially, you don't have to learn a new language. Yes, you have to drive on the other side of the road and redo your driver's license and learn how their financial system works, and, you know, cultures being different, and like get to know the city and all of that kind of typical stuff when you move to a place. But I think if you're gonna emigrate, this is quite an easy place to emigrate relative to maybe some other places. Especially helps that people are very friendly. And yes, it's not the kind of friendly that's going to be your BFF tomorrow, but it's the kind of friendly that makes it nice when it's new and you're confused. Like, oftentimes in the beginning, you won't know something and it will be new to you, and it makes such a difference when people are just nice to you about it, or that their assumption is just like, oh, let me help this person out. And if you're struggling with something, it's just people are friendly and they're so nice. In the beginning, we had to deal with like the financing for the car and checks and all that. We haven't done that since the car thing, but it just made such a difference when you don't know what you're doing and the teller is like so lovely to you and seems interested in who you are as a person and your day. So it really, like, I think makes a difference moving to a place where people are friendly, they speak a language that you are familiar with, so that yes, other things are adapting, but it's easier than, you know, another place would be. I do think our adaptation has been also different because we had a baby 4.5 months after moving here. So I think that typical experiences that might have happened earlier are now happening later for us, like the really missing family and friends thing. But also, I think that only now do I feel like we're starting to live here. I feel that up until this point, it was like preparing to have a baby, having a baby, okay, adjusting to parenting, Ian adjusting to his job, that really only now at a year do I feel like, okay, we live here. Like, we're not just adapting. We're not just living in this major like uncertainty. And I'm really excited for that. And I'm really excited to see what the next year holds. The final point I want to make is that having been here a year, we've experienced all 4 seasons as well. So there's also not that uncertainty of like, how's the weather gonna look? How's the climate going to be? Like, what do we need to do to adjust to this new season? Like, we've done all of them now. Like now we know going into winter more or less what to expect. We know, okay, next year, how do we prepare better for summer? Because I was like slow with the plants and all of that. And we know just generally things a little bit better. So I'm quite excited for this new phase that we're going to enter into. Of course, the first year of living anywhere, the first year of being parents, and loads of firsts for us have been wonderful. But I am very excited to just live now and not really be so much adapting. Anyway, that is my video of reflecting on the first year living in Canada. If you like this video, please remember to like this video. And if you like my content, please remember to subscribe